Bob Cooney here with a new version of the Being Virtual Show deep dive with one of my favorite humans, Brent Bushnell, the co-founder of Two Bit Circus, which is a micro amusement park that pushes the envelope around technology, immersive entertainment, community. And we're going to do a conversation with Brent where we get into not only what they've done, but where they're going in immersive entertainment. Brent is the son of the legendary Nolan Bushnell, who created Chuck E. Cheese and Atari and a couple of minor things in the gaming and LBE space. And he's gone on to really create his own wake, really, as a big mover and shaker in this industry, the creator of Two Bit Circus. I want to welcome Brent Bushnell. Hey, bud.
All right. What up, sir? Right. Nice to see you.
We're here, yeah, and I have to get you on a fucking TV show so we can actually catch up. And I'm so looking forward to this.
Oh, dude, it's great to see you. It's great, and we should do this more often in general.
We should. This is going to be the most self-indulgent Being Virtual deep dive that I've ever done. So I apologize in advance if you're watching. And hopefully you find this as interesting as I know I'm going to find it.
That's so fun, dude. Well, you know, you're getting me on the back of having just gone to the Galactic Star Cruiser.
Dude, I saw that on LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever it was you put it. And
oh my God, it was freaking spectacular. I mean, they really, went out of their way to make everything feel foreign, like you were in a place that you'd never been before, down to the light switch and the dispensers and the tiling. So there was just the sort of everything you could see and touch. And then all of the whole sort of overlay of actors and narrative. You have this sort of data pad that's an app on your phone that allows you to interact with the different characters, and they're texting you and you're unlocking challenges. And it was stunning.
Now you've done a bunch of immersive theater. I think you were the first person I know that did Sleep No More.
Yeah.
And I did Sleep No More, and I did it by myself. I hadn't eaten. So it was New Year's, it was Halloween night. I was hangry and I just couldn't get into it. But compare it to, and for those of you who don't know, explain Sleep No More and then talk about.
Well, I was going to say everything you said there, other than the hangry part, was kind of the perfect way to go to Sleep No More. I mean, I think some of this stuff can be really fun alone because, the difference between traveling alone and with any other number of people is you can sort of just take on a role, and be, something completely different without any of the sort of expectations of the people you're with. But Sleep No More is sort of the biggest breakout success in the category of immersive theater, which is still writing itself of sort of what it even means. But immersive theater is, rather than sitting in a seat facing a stage and passively observing the action over there, it's all around you. You're wandering around, in the case of Sleep No More, 100,000 square feet in a building on the west side of Manhattan, 5 stories, you're in a room of taxidermy, and then walk out of that and you're in a room filled with tons of, trees and all the while there are actors running around. And with time you figure out, oh, wow, this is like a version of Macbeth, but it's sort of non-linear for you. You might be in a room where some performance just happened, but then all the actors scatter and go somewhere else, and you can either choose to follow them or just wander on your own. And so I think that it really it so moves you from being this passive, just consumer to this very active, co-creator. You're part of the show. If you just sit there and wait for stuff to happen, it's probably not going to be as fun as if you really go around and are curious and are trying stuff out.
Yeah, I got sucked into that. I got pulled into this room where there was like a fortune teller or a palm reader or something by myself. And it was this really intimate experience where she was like holding my hand and reading, and I didn't understand really what she was saying. I don't even remember if she talked or not, but it was kind
just
of
for you.
It was just for me. It was by far like a highlight of the event by far.
And probably the most memorable, when you think back to it, that memory probably really stands out. And, there's a lot of great research and data to support this, right? Coming out of the educational field, the second you're having to make a decision and respond, you're going to remember it better, right? If you are just passively reading a book, passively engaging an exercise, it's just not nearly as effective as being forced to make a decision. And then the more of your senses that are involved in this stuff, the more permanent the memory. And so if it's not just sight and sound, but touch and emotion and, all these other things, that'll really make it, that much more persistent in your brain.
So I want to pause there because you just hit on something really interesting. And of course, it's the Being Virtual show. And I do like to talk about virtual reality occasionally. And so the notion of VR and the ability to integrate all the senses into the Void was early in doing that, right? And we're going to see more of that become accessible and sustainable from a business perspective. What's your take on that? And do you think that it's going to be something that propels VR or?
Oh yeah. Hey, Disney spent, I don't know, $1 billion building that hotel and Star Wars Land and sort of all the associated, and so for those that can get all the way to Orlando to do the thing for 2 days, it's just, you're completely immersed, but nope, it's not often that the stars line up to be able to make that happen. And so it's nice to have lots of other ways to engage and immerse. And VR is a great way to do that for 5 minutes after work, every night when you get home or whatever, it can sort of, fit that slot. But then also it opens up whole new ways of storytelling. In real life, it's really hard to be shrunk down to the size of a mouse and be surrounded by tons of stuff that's way bigger than you. Yeah, maybe there's themed environments that'll do that, but you can play with scale, you can play with the reality in a way that would be really hard to build in real life.
So the Galactic Star Cruiser, so it was 2 days, 2.5 days or so. It's really expensive, right? So let's start there.
Yeah. So
how did you feel about the cost of it?
You don't go to this just like a hotel, because, you're not like, oh, should I stay 1 night or 2? It is a very finite, it begins at 1:00 on, in our case, Sunday and went until 9 a.m. Tuesday morning. So it's 2 nights there, a full day in the middle. All of your food and is included. There is a bar that you can pay extra for cocktails, but then also includes a park pass, to go into to Hollywood Adventure and, Hollywood Studios rather.
What was your experience there? Give me a 2-minute overview of your experience and how it felt like, because I think that are you a Star Wars fan, first of all?
Total Star Wars fan. There are extreme Star Wars fan, right? 10 out of 10, they're waiting hours for Clone Wars to release, on the streets. I'm maybe not there, but I am I love the characters. I grew up with this, IP. It is, I've seen all of at this point, most of them. I'm like a 6 out of 10 fan. I'm not your crazy Uber fan, but I love that IP. And I also love to participate. I think a lot of this stuff is so much more fun when you're part of the show, right? It's one thing to be watching the Halloween parade. It's another to be in it, and so I do really like to participate. So I dressed up. I got sort of a modified kind of Han Solo thing. I just happened to have this North Face kind of vest that I got for snowboarding, and everybody, when you get there, they sort of talk about what place what planet are you from? What planet are you from? All of them are asking, and so I was from the North Face of Hoth. But so it's fun to kind of participate, and dress up. Probably half the people there had some level of dress up going on, and there was also a retail store there on site. So if you just hadn't come with something, you could get a cape, you could get a shirt, something like that. And all that is really fun because when you sort of choose to sort of suspend your life and take on another role, you could, for those 40 hours or whatever it is, not go back to reality. Really, you could choose to, because even from the moment that they take you from the Star Cruiser into Hollywood Studios, you're going through a launch ship, and then you get to a hallway, and the hallway deposits you right in the middle of Batuu. We were on and off of Star Cruisers, and all in a themed environment in order to complete the illusion. And for a brief moment when we were there and playing around Batuu, we were like, hey, we got a little extra time. Should we go in and do the Muppet ride, across the park? And leaving there felt like a distortion, because we'd already been immersed in the world of being on this Star Cruiser for 12 hours. And it was sort of like, record stop to sort of get out of that and go into these other lands, because you really could be completely immersed in it, for the time you're there. Even the food, we had blue shrimp and bantha meat, and and so then they're like, oh, hey, would you like a translation? And they're like, that's short rib.
So would you do it again?
I would absolutely do it again, in the way that like a great movie that you love, you would watch again and pick out different stuff that time and really, get to see it through, eyes. I'm sure that they will add additional narrative. I didn't go through all of the stuff, but I'm not one often to like race to rewatch a movie immediately. But in a couple of years, and particularly with like a different group of friends or family or something, I'd love to watch somebody else go through it. And they have a great theater there. They'll be able to evolve the story and show. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was an episode 2, and all of that would be fun.
Yeah, cool. And the capacity is severely constrained, right? Which is one of the reasons the price is so high, I would imagine. So there's a lot of Star Wars fans in the world that are gonna, hopefully, and some of those will be able to afford to do that because it is a premium experience.
Hey, I think that you don't have to be a Star Wars fan to go. If you like immersive storytelling, if you like to be taken on an adventure like no movie could do, you don't even need to know who the characters are to be like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm in a whole different galaxy. And so I think that, it's definitely worth that. It's a 100-key hotel. I think you can get up to sort of 4-ish people in each room. So max 400 people there. There was probably 300 where, when we were there. But so many activities, so many things to be able to do. I mean, think about that. A hotel that you don't leave for normally you go to a hotel so that you can go to the place that you're in and go and do other stuff. This is a hotel where you're there the whole time, and there's like
a cruise ship, basically. It's a landlocked cruise ship, right?
Yeah, right. Without, with its own activities.
Yeah. Interesting. And so let's talk a little bit about what's going on with Two Bit. And I know you may or may not be able to talk about certain things based on what's going on with the company and stuff. Yeah. So, but you've come from Two Bit started as a carnival.
Before that as a as basically a ragtag circus, bringing interactive entertainment to people's parties.
Yeah.
So
okay.
we had like a few sort of cabinets, this sort of big trackball that we'd made using Eric's clown circus ball, a room of laser beams, a sort of these controllers that made for a fun game, and we would rent that stuff out. Yeah, actually, at first we were just bringing it to our friends' parties, just for fun, and then somebody from Microsoft went to one of those events and was like, "Hey, would you guys do that for us? Like, we got a party coming up for E3," and we were like, "You're going to pay us? No way!" And so we did that for years, and then also did a bunch of sort of custom branded stuff, and so we were kind of before experiential and immersive were such sort of buzzwords, we were kind of an experiential studio, building physical activations for brands. We did stuff with Great Wolf Lodge and helped Dave and Buster's prototype VR in the really early days, and so we were kind of poking around this space before deciding, hey, we've done this for everybody else, let's do our own traveling carnival.
And I don't know if you remember this, but I was in LA at UCLA, and you were speaking in front of an entrepreneurial class of college students, and you got up there and you said, would you be willing to pay $20 for a ticket to do this thing? And you went ahead and described this. I don't know if you remember that.
Wow.
And I was in the room when you first pitched that.
Around the carnival, would you pay $20 to go to this carnival? Yeah, that I do remember that totally. And I always loved going out, even before we opened Two Bit, our micro amusement park. I got dressed up in a suit and I walked up and down Abbot Kinney asking people what their opinions of the name of it and whatnot. And I always loved talking to people directly about things.
What did you learn from that? Like, so I'm a big believer in, there's a place for market research, but you have to be careful about giving too much credence to it. If people can't see what you see, they can only imagine what they can imagine, right?
Right. And if you're not, and I'm not very scientific about it, I'm really looking for a gut check, just a little bit of external feedback. It's nice to, you get biased results when you ask your team and when you ask your friends and family. There's nothing like a stranger who just doesn't care about you much at all, and is sort of going to give you the raw, opinion. And so I really got, frankly, confirmation that Two Bit Circus to name the park was the right thing because, as a company, we had done this B2B experiential work. We'd done our own traveling carnival, which was a new brand. It was called Steam Carnival. And so now here we were going into opening these permanent entertainment complexes. And the question was, is it a new brand? Is it Two Bit Circus? Is it, what is it? And, the sort of code name for the project was the backyard, because the backyard of the circus is the sort of private part where, they're prepping everything and, getting ready for taking it on stage. And so it was our backyard. And then some people were like, hey, maybe we should just name it the backyard, and we were like, well, is that right? I don't know. So we really, we weren't sure and came up with tons of alternatives, including things strictly with emojis, and ultimately, went back to Two Bit Circus.
Yeah. Interesting. And so how has that gone? And what are some of your big learnings from that first location, the permanent location?
I mean, I would laughingly say it's been awesome and terrible. I don't encourage anybody to try to, operate a location-based thing during a global pandemic. It's really tough. Don't do that. Really bad for business.
So you wouldn't fund that business plan?
Yeah, there's timing, like opportunity and preparation, meeting timing. And so, we opened a year and a half before the pandemic, right? We had a solid 18 months. And then, we were like a freaking rocket ship, and then ran into a brick wall. And so wonderfully, the pandemic unlocked all sorts of things, out of the bloodshed and carnage, but we built a whole play from home interactive game show that was an extension of the game show we'd been running at the park. It was a new product, and we did 800 shows like that. We did a public show, every week for 100 weeks, and then 700 private shows, which I just can't believe. It was multiple shows a day sometimes, and we did everything from bar mitzvahs to get-togethers and team building and whatever. And so that really kept that was a major thing that kept the company alive.
Are you still doing those, or have you stopped?
So we still do them. Yeah, we're still doing them. We've started to also do now game shows back in the park. In fact, we just ran a really successful test this last weekend, and have done some exploration of both at the same time. There's a live show happening at the park. That's a live stream that you can also tune into from home. We're really trying to tweak that model. The thing that was really revelatory once we were able to reopen and run those shows in sort of both capacities was how important it is, the headspace of your audience and sort of where they are, right? You could do a great show for the people live in the room, with the host focusing on the people live in the room. You could do a great show for the people at home, focusing on the people at home. And to do a great show for both is sort of harder, because the people that are live in the room, they're just sort of on a different time scale. The people at home, like if you don't have my attention, I'm in my home, I'm going to go do something else. It's like, let's get through let's do this thing and do it, whereas in public, it can be a little more loose. And so we've been exploring sort of how to do that in a way that feels great for both. Yeah.
Because I think there was a narrative, and I was promoting this narrative during the pandemic, that all of this innovation was going to come out of the pandemic. And the question was, were any of those business models going to stick? And We're seeing a lot about remote work and people not wanting to go back to the office. And we'll see how that hybrid thing works out. And hybrid events are another thing that now people are trying to figure out. And I think a lot of event companies are saying, running a virtual event is great and hard, and running a live event is great and hard, and running a hybrid event is 10 times harder than running either one. And so,
yeah, hey, I think that I wouldn't maybe say 10 times. I would say like 1.8 times. And here's how I got to that number, is that I do think that they both need to be thought of as their own event, right? You want to think of, because somebody's not going to get to see both of them. So they're only going to get one or the other. And so you need to make them both great and sort of compete in their zone of competition, right? As a virtual event, you're going to be competing with all the other virtual events. As a physical thing, you're going to be competing with all the other physical things. And so those have sort of their own thing. but you do get some synergy, and so I think a lot of the content creation that happens at the live event can radiate out into the virtual event, and you didn't have to really you had to sort of produce that for the virtual event, but you didn't have to like create it from the beginning. The live event's doing that, and like that you get some drafting off of each other, sort of, oh, hey, we're live, we got somebody from virtual with a question, let's pipe that in, and I think that it gets kind of powerful. Like there can be sort of an augmentation of the two, but it's definitely harder than one or the other.
Yeah. And so you were running these events, this game show, you were running it remotely. Now you're running it. And don't open an FEC or an entertainment center in the pandemic. What were some of the surprising insights you've learned from operating a permanent, like, significant size entertainment center in LA?
We had a big question, right out of the gates, which was like, are we gonna, back to branding, are we gonna promote the brand of the park, Two Bit Circus, come to this thing, and we just invented the term micro amusement park? Or should we talk about the things that are at the park, right? It's a house of brands. Here's each of the attractions that we've got. Do you come and do this new thing? And it was really a toss-up of sort of which is the way to do it. Market the house, or the branded house, or the house of brands. And we landed at branded house because people didn't know what a micro amusement park was. We had a little bit of educating to do, sort of get people up to speed that, hey, there's a new thing that sort of, we made up that term intentionally. We wanted to sort of separate from, what we felt what else was out there. But that's a blessing and a curse. You have to now sort of train people what that means. When you go to dinner, you know what to expect the flow of service to look like. You're going to walk to the host stand. They're going to take you to the table. They're going to give you the menus. They'll come for drinks and then back for entrees. That's a well-oiled machine in your expectations as a user, and so we were like, well, hey, here's this thing that is not quite a movie theater. It's not quite like mini golf. Like, it's not quite, and so how do you even visit that thing? And we had to kind of train people on that. And hey, you're going to come and you're going to get a stored value card. You're going to get to go and do it. But some of these things require a booking time, and that, and that's still an active exploration for us, and I think many businesses are always trying to figure out, like, hey, how do we get this information to the customer at just the right time, so that
I think amusement parks, and I wonder, do you have to do one or the other? Like, amusement parks will, the reason they build $10 million roller coasters is because, that summer, it's all about that $10 million roller coaster at Six Flags or at whatever, right? And so I wonder if you have to do a little bit of both.
I think you're right on. And let's add time in here, because I think in the very beginning, when you first open, it's, hey, we're here, come over.
We're new, check out
we're
the
new,
new
and it's different. And here's a new thing. And then 1, 2, 3 years in, now it's like, hey, we're still here and there's new stuff, come back for the new stuff. And so I think you do want both, and sort of as it progresses, the answer changes.
Yeah. And you didn't really have enough time and runway to experiment with that year 2, year 3, because
our hair was on fire. It was still, we were 18 months in, we were just starting to tweak and iterate, but hey, I'm thankful for it. As hard as it all was, it would have been so much, we would have given up so much earlier on a virtual program if we'd had the right regular park, because that was freaking hard. It's hard to figure that out. And if we'd had a running amusement park, every other thing would have been more prioritized than trying to figure out that hard thing.
And so before we move on to the new strategy and the big news, let's talk a little bit about your experience with virtual reality. You've done a lot of VR. You've got Hologate, Birdly, the Beat Saber. You've done a bunch of VR stuff. What's your experience been with VR, and how are you feeling about it today versus 3 years ago?
I still love it. I'm long on the technology. I think that there are things that there's stuff that you can do at home that's wonderful at home. There's stuff that you can only do in public that's wonderful in public. And then there's stuff that, whether it's XR or AR, are going to be great for those platforms, and so I think that they each have their place. And the content for home is getting amazing. I Expect You to Die we're starting to see sequels coming out for the stuff that was awesome. Beat Saber is getting new music packs. I Expect You to Die is a sort of escape room style James Bond thing I just absolutely love. I just finished or in the middle of The Last Clockwinder, which is another sort of beautiful sort of puzzle narrative story game. And so I love the exploration there, and I still am an active player. And so it's neat to see that machine just continue of great content coming. And then in public, I think we're getting a lot more clear, the fact that there's now, it's not just, hey, here's the home stuff that you can do in public, here's your bay, and that it's a lot more like, hey, here's a thing made for public, made for all the reasons that you're going to be out in public. It's a 4-player experience, has sort of emerged as a formula, because 4 is a great number. A lot of people come in groups of 2 and 4, so that's a really good, attraction size. It's a nice footprint for a family entertainment center to be able to deploy. And now we get a nice social game, and people will say like, but I'm there socially. Why would I put a headset on my head? And it's like, well, because just like you would go to a movie together, you get all the time leading up to it. You get to discuss it afterwards. You're there live together, and you, even though you're in the headset, you can hear the audio of your friends. And you're like, and their mannerisms. And you're like, that's Bob right there, and that's Maggie over there. And so all of that, I think adds to the experience. And I also really, big thing for me is bits and atoms, right? Like, let's deploy the atoms so we can change the bits. Movie theaters did that really effectively in every city in America, and I think we have sort of seen those start to uncouple a little bit. You can deploy the formats, but now there's going to be a lot of new content coming, building for that 4-player in-person venue, and it's cool to see that evolve. So I think we're hitting like a kind of a maturity that it can be really nicely explored.
What are some of the things you think we still need the VR industry or market needs to do what are some of the problems it needs to solve still?
Every operator will talk about the downtimes that they would love to monetize, and you better be crushing it Friday and Saturday, because that's your sort of core. But then what are the interesting things you can do when it's not that? And one thing I still think needs to happen, and if anybody has this, I would love to know, I want like a mindfulness, meditation, team building, corporate thing that I can do in public involving VR. And that I would be able to sort of activate on a series of headsets and be able to go to the local businesses in my community and legitimately say, hey, here is some cool science. This is legitimately gonna, maybe not fully therapeutic, but it's gonna relax your crew. It's gonna get them hanging out together, and then sure, stay and eat and drink and be entertained. But I think there's an opportunity for sort of like a facilitated VR corporate product.
VR World in New York ran a special installation of a VR experience called Ayahuasca.
Oh, wow.
And there was a guide, and there was a room, and there was like vines, and like you were in the jungle in Peru.
Cool.
And it was like a 20-minute guided experience. And then the other one, have you done Trip?
Yes, totally. That's a great call. That's a
really interesting. Yeah. And I think that's built on some technology that was developed out of Melbourne at the university down there. I can't think of it, but where they have a platform where they did all this research around color and sound and shape and patterns and how it affects your cognitive state. And they released it as a platform out to the world.
That's part of Trip.
I haven't confirmed this, but I'm 90. The company was called Liminal VR out of Melbourne.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing this. And did I would love. I'm totally interested in more of that stuff if you see it. So I will look into both.
Yeah, and I know those guys. I actually did a early demo of theirs. I met them at VRLA when VRLA was a thing. Was it like 2017 or something like that? And it's worth checking out. So let's talk about the new project. So let's first of all talk about the SPAC, right? So
I don't know this. Just on the Two Bit front, we're opening in Dallas.
Oh, that's right. You got a new location coming in Dallas.
We've got Dallas coming. We're
because there's not enough entertainment centers in Dallas.
Oh my God, man. Well, I'm so excited about the Dallas market. I gotta say, I really, there's so many there because the market is hot for it. People love it there. You've got the headquarters of Dave & Buster's and Main Event and Top Golf and, Toka Social and all these different groups. And, it's a really, it's a demographic that loves to, interactive entertainment. So we're very excited to go there.
And what's the timeline for that?
Soon, it'll before the end of the year.
Cool. And what's the and how will this location, like, so what are you doing differently? What did you learn and how you applying it?
The big one, the huge one is, how when you get into Two Bit Circus in LA, you get to the counter, the guest counter, and you get all checked in and whatever. That area in Dallas is its own room. And so you can sort of talk, do your ticketing, talk to the people, whatever, and then cross the threshold into the park. And that is just going to be a ginormous delta. And part of it is that we will also be able to add a little merch area, which was very hard to do, sort of flopping about in the middle of the whole park, in LA, and we ended up taking it down. There was a lot of shrinkage. There was a lot of, it was just hard to staff it and man it. Whereas it'll be able to sort of easily be part of the check-in process in Dallas. So I'm just ecstatic about that change. That's a big one. The other one is just sort of it's subtle, but so important, is the sort of arc. The map of how you enter, it sort of arcs all the way around. And so at all times, you're sort of like, what's going on over there? What's going on over there? You've got sort of a little bit of curiosity driving you to all the way to the back of the area. Whereas in LA, it's sort of one big room and there's still, pockets and whatnot. But I think it'll be nice to be able to sort of guide the user along that. Those are probably the two that I'm the most excited about. And our theater, our interactive theater, the wall opens up in the back in Dallas, and it'll be able to go from a small little intimate theater to a nice big one.
So everybody can watch from outside the theater. The theater becomes the venue. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So are you thinking about other types of entertainment there, like music?
Oh my God, dude, are you kidding? Always. We're always building. So we got a beta night coming up September 29th in Los Angeles. We've got a bunch of different stuff that's going to be showcased, a number of different kind of interactive game shows, a number of sort of an AR combat game called Wrecked that's really great and a great.
Is that Six Lives play game?
Yes. Sib's thing.
Yeah.
So really excited to have that. And it's going to be a great night. So anybody who's around LA, September 29th.
So on the event side, like I really believe that events are going to become a big part of the FEC industry going forward, because there's so much competition. And I think Randy White's talked a lot about this. It was like the first year is great. And then after that is like, how do you get people to come? Because there's always something new to go to in every market, especially a market like Dallas or LA. Like there's so many new things that you can go check out. Why do I want to go? It's like Galactic Star Cruiser. Why do I want to go back there again? Yeah. And so, events create that reason to come back because they're exclusive and they're time limited. How do you view that? And what do you think of that?
Yeah, I really like where your head's at. We're open to the public. We also have, a bunch of private events, but we have what we also, I've been calling 2-Bit Presents, which is sort of the events that we put on. And that's Beta Night is one of those things. Our Anti-Gala, which is our big annual fundraiser for our nonprofit, which is a ton of fun. And also these Web3 salons. I've been dragging 2-Bit into Web3. And so this has been a fun way to do it. And so those three different events are sort of our own production, and we do some special content around them. And, I've always aspirationally want 2-Bit to feel a little bit like a community center, that you could come and be a part of with some regularity. And you might be there for one time with your company for a team building and back with your friends or family and a third time for some special event that we're doing with your friends. And so these are a little step on that way towards special events. And I agree, it's a fun way. It's a great way for specialty content to see the light. Our beta nights are a wonderful way for us to see in context what new entertainment is great and how does it fit in the park and whatnot. It's a great way to be able to showcase, awesome creators. And, we were those creators without a venue so long ago that where it was so valuable to be able to get real-time feedback of you build it first for yourself and for your friends. And then all of a sudden you realize that when little Johnny and his grandma go through it, that you've got the height and the contrast all wrong, So it's important to sort of get a lot of diverse feedback. So yeah, I totally, so I agree about on the events front. And then I also think that in terms of sort of revisitability, you back to our sort of, do you market the place or the things at the place? I think there's room now with the Bits versus Atoms to get new content in there on the regular. I think immersive theater unlocks. I think there's a lot of room for immersive theater productions that can sort of drop on top of an existing restaurant or bar. In China right now, LARPing is getting massive, and it's sort of replacing the enthusiasm that tore across the country for escape rooms, and people are signing up for LARPs that are not just one episode. They're signing up for a whole season of interactive content. And, frankly, the dinner theater thing needs reimagining, and this is a great way, and think about a LARP being a very tiny micro version of what, I got to do with the Galactic Star Cruiser. How do we do that in a fun way that can be dropped on your local bar and restaurant? And so I think that kind of stuff is going to be a really great way to bring additional content, additional reasons for gathering, for these locations.
Yeah, and you mentioned, aspirationally wanting to become a center of community and build community, and I know how hard that is. Talk to me a little bit about, because I've been really looking at esports a lot lately, and esports, like, in order to build an esports business, there's got to be a community. You have to build a community, and building a community it's hard and it takes time. What's your experience been hitting that aspiration, and are there steps that you're taking intentionally, or is it just like, setting an intention and waiting for it to manifest? Like, how do you approach it?
I would say that for each of those events I named, our beta night, our Web3 salon, and our anti-gala, they all have their own little micro communities around them. The beta night is very much creators around LA coming from Hollywood and the game industry and Disney and whatnot, both wanting to come and contribute their stuff and to just be around new stuff.
How often do you run those?
Occasionally, probably a couple times a year, 2 to 3 times a year. And it's really, I wish that they had some regular cadence, but it really sort of is a lining up of enough content that we are ready to put on a full show and a good time. And then, the Web3 salon is very much people interested in DAOs and DeFi and NFTs and crypto and that kind of stuff, or people that are experts in that and they're launching and they want to be, showcased. And so we've got sort of both sides there, and experimented with all the different ways in which that could cater to the different demographics. So, there are lightning talks and a panel for those that are the experts to be able to share, a time for Q&A from both the virtual and the physical in order to be able to give people a little bit of feedback. And then topic tables we just experimented with last time. And so, for more kind of active discussion.
And do you make money with those events, or are they more about just trying to build community?
Not really. It is much more, for the community, bringing them together. It is making money on them is secondary for the most part.
Yeah. So it's a community building marketing, and hopefully they spend some money, but and I think particularly at a time when marketing has really changed, right? It's not sort of enough to just do the thing anymore. You sort of want to talk about the story of doing the thing. And Beta Night is kind of a way of being able to give the microphone to a bunch of creators to say, hey, here's the thing that we're doing, and we're able and come and get to try it. And so I think it changes it's not marketing per se, it's sort of like an opportunity for content generation that ends up authentically getting into people's inbox that like that kind of stuff. And so it's, it feels frankly less salesy. It just feels sort of more genuinely like, if you care about this stuff, this might be for you. Yeah, really interesting. And so before we move on to the new thing, gated admission versus so you walked up, you talked about, you have this counter, now it's going to become a room. And what have you learned about how to charge for that experience, and what might you be doing differently based on those learnings, or are you going to stick with it? Yeah,
I mean, it's an evolution. I think that, we right now, when you come, you buy a preset card and, with a certain amount of value on it. And then you can top that up as you go, as you're sort of paying as you go. I still want to experiment with that. I think that there's an opportunity, especially when we're talking about things that are frankly limited number of seats. VR is just 4 people at a time or whatever, and so you have sort of a time slicing and organizing you want to do to give people the maximum experience of having to go through as many, getting to go through as many things and sit in the least amount of lines. You sort of want to hit both those local, maxima, minima. And I think that there's room to explore there too, to make it clean, make it, casual, because we're also hanging out. You and I haven't seen each other for a while. We want to catch up, and so what is our buzzers going off, in order to alert us to go to things, or, what's happening? How does that happen? And I think that it is, there's an opportunity there to make that flow feel, I know the best way to visit Two Bit, but I don't know that it's perfectly clear to people when they arrive. And I think that's true for frankly all amusement parks and theme. It's like there's an optimal way to do it, or one where it's going to take, it's going to be less efficient.
Yeah, and Disney's got some pretty smart people working for them, and they're continually evolving the park experience, right? With smart bands and AI-driven queues and all kinds of stuff.
The Genie Pass, the Fast Pass, all of that stuff are approaches to sort of make that, great. And so people are sort of willing to, have a thing on the calendar that they need to show up for, and they're willing to sort of be a little bit responsible. My dad used to always joke, that the second people arrive, in an amusement environment, their IQ points drop by 10, and it's really just because you don't want to read, you are being entertained. You feel like you don't want to be working, and some of this stuff can feel like work, right? If I'm having to manage my schedule and be on my phone all the time, that feels like work. And so how do you make it feel natural and fun and playful and, while still being able to do the very brass tacks important stuff that makes your business run?
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, the customer experience, it feels like it's got a long way to go in our industry, and there's a lot that we can do better in connecting all of those dots. So, so now you're building resorts. What the fuck, man? So how did you go from LA to Dallas, and then the SPAC deal with the hotels, and it kind of makes sense to me looking at the management team coming out of Great Wolf Lodge. I mean, there's obviously a lot of history there running resorts, entertainment facilities, but how much can you tell us about the story?
I mean, it's really been so exciting because in a lot of ways it's full circle. One of the earliest projects that Eric, my co-founder, and I did, when we were first in the early days of Two Bit, was a collaboration to build what would now be called an escape room, but that wasn't really a term then, for Great Wolf Lodge. And we'd gotten to know Kim Schaefer, and she and I were both, on the advisory board for Magic Quest, the wonderful wand game that you could go all around that Denise Weston and Rick Briggs did. And so I'd known Kim, and she was like, hey, I've got all this extra space in Seattle, our Seattle location. Like, what do you think? And so we built this immersive experience, me, Eric, my brother, Tyler, and Wyatt. So we'd had some, experience sort of being around that, environment. And then went back to Two Bit, building our, Carnival and all the other stuff. And then a few years later, as we were getting ready to do the parks, reconnected with Kim, and I was like, hey, we're getting ready to do this thing. And she's like, I've been at Great Wolf, 20 plus years. She's like, I'm ready for something new. Like, well, let's do it. And so she helped to get, the micro amusement park open. And Two Bit has always been a little bit of an odd duck, right? We don't really fit, we're not just like a pure play FEC. We're not like a pure play, game maker, attractions maker. We've always sort of spread across a couple of different categories. And part of that is we built, 60% of the stuff that's at Two Bit Circus. We built it for, over years. Some of it went to our carnival. Some of it was the stuff we did with brands, and some of it we just built directly for the amusement parks. But, as it sits right now, all that stuff is being monetized in one place on earth, in Los Angeles. All this IP, all this time and effort, we got 100+ things we built over the years. So that was like the natural step. Of course, Dallas, let's get more parks open. But back to the whole bits versus atoms idea, a hotel being able to entertain people for longer than a 2 or 3 hour stay, was always something, or it was something we wanted to do for a long time. It was something we thought about when we did the thing with Kim and Great Wolf years ago. There is way more than 2 or 3 hours of entertainment at Two Bit, and so we really could do something similar of being able to, bring people into a hotel and have them be entertained for, the full weekend. And so it was a really natural step. And Kim and one of the people that was on the board of Great Wolf in the pandemic, were like, hey, there's this opportunity. There's all these business hotels that have been really impacted by COVID. They've got this ginormous conference center and no conferences, business travel didn't bounce back. And so, and most of the data says it doesn't come back for another couple of years. And so the thesis was, let's take over some of those hotels. We'll put Two Bit Circus and more entertainment in the conference center, bleed it out around the hotel, and you'll turn it from a business focused hotel to a family hotel, at a time when family travel is just completely off the charts. People they're working remote, so they can do it, they can take their family away and go and do something. And so it's sort of a rebalancing, of supply and demand. And at a time when we've got a bunch of IP that we can, take out into other contexts.
So we've talked about Sleep No More. We've talked about Galactic Star Cruiser. Was that a bit of a research and development trip for you to try to see what's possible? And
I mean, me, dude, I'm obsessed with this space. I try to do every single thing that I can get my hands on. And it's funny, trying to convince my wife, like, no, really, I'm working. She's like, it looks like you're playing. I'm like, but my play is my work. So it's those things are all sort of smashed together. But there's not a lot of examples of, immersive entertainment hotels. There's this one, I know that there's a couple of IPs out there, exploring it, but they're really, Great Wolf Lodge was sort of one of the early versions of that, and so I'm ecstatic for the idea of overnight stay, and being able to entertain over that, length of time really feels like a great palette.
And so will there be a Two Bit Circus micro amusement park in the hotel? Is that how much of the concept can you talk? I know there's been some concept art that's flown around on the internet. But how much of this can you talk about?
We'll have the circus grounds, which is basically a Two-Bit Circus with other entertainment. There's an adventure that goes out throughout the whole park or the whole resort that is like an additional sort of scavenger hunt, narrative experience. And then there's, food and beverage and, a bunch of, they are large hotels. So there'll be a lot of opportunity for other forms of F&B and entertainment.
Cool. And can you say where are they and what's the timeline for these to manifest themselves in the world?
No word on timing yet, but Denver and Stanford, Connecticut are the first two. And so the Stanford, Connecticut one, literally is 45-minute train ride from New York. I took it recently to go from Penn Station to Stanford, Connecticut. It's like not even a full hour. It's just awesome.
And Denver with Meow Wolf's been wildly successful there. I think
Denver is really going through something incredible right now. There's a great immersive theater scene. Obviously, Meow Wolf has a number of installations there. It's really an exciting time, to be in Denver. So we're really pumped about that.
And so, what was how involved were you in the SPAC merger and the corporate finance side of this thing, and what was that like? Just a little background. One of my first careers was as a stockbroker in the 80s in Denver.
Oh yeah.
Back in the heyday of the penny stock market. And so
amazing.
So LaserStorm, I acquired LaserStorm from a company that was a blind pool or a shell corporation that was going to try to build a laser tag arena. And they decided that didn't make sense because their corporate mission was to do a reverse merger with another company. And so I bought the prototype from them and they went off to merge with another company. So back then that was like a shady, like the whole SPAC thing was called blind pools and penny stocks. And now it's turned into a $1 billion business.
During the pandemic, it got, I think, and part of it in the pandemic was you could get anybody on a call, everybody was available on Zoom. And so there was a lot of money that was able to be raised in order to sort of go after these businesses. And, and so SPACs, and then there was a number of businesses that really successfully were able to de-SPAC and publicly list, and, have had varying degrees of success since. A lot of SPACs have, lost a bunch of value, but there are those that have worked also. And so the big driver of this was Alon Blutinger, who was on Kim's board at Great Wolf and did a bunch of hospitality roll-ups in the past. And so he was the one who really navigated this. And then Kim, as the CEO of the combined entity, and then Alex Lombardo, who was Two Bit's old CFO for years, until a little time before the pandemic. And so, familiar face, has been there for ages, and so really knew. And so I helped where I could, but really Alon was the one who really drove it.
Yeah, cool. And how much money did you guys raise? Can you say?
We will know a lot more after the DSPAC. So we should talk, in a few months.
What's a DSPAC?
When it's all consummated.
Gotcha. Okay. So there's a closing that has to happen at some point, and got it.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly right.
Yeah. I hate to say this, but I have to ask, what's next for you? You've got a lot going on in your world. You've had one baby still?
Yeah, we've just got one kid who's 2 now and just freaking peak adorable. It's so funny. He one time saw a picture of a plane on my phone. And so from that, ever since, phones to him mean planes. And so every time I'm on my phone, he's like, "See airplane, daddy, see airplane. I want to see the airplane." He just thinks he must have the funniest view of humanity looking at airplanes all the time. But he's just totally wonderful. And it's neat to have him get old enough that we can go and have adventures. We've been playing with Duplo Legos a lot. And, I'm obsessed with Legos, and to be, sitting on the floor of the kitchen playing Legos with him is pretty dreamy. So that's been really fun. And what else? I'm just ecstatic for all the stuff, the things that we're doing at Two Bit. I'm working on an escape cocktail. That's a locked escape room in a cocktail for a 2-person escape experience, or I guess it's a 2-person drinking experience. I don't know. So I love having kind of little side projects like that. It's a wild time, man. I feel like every year is bringing a lot of new change. So, I'm just enjoying the ride.
Yeah, cool. Will you be at Iapa in Orlando?
I don't think I will this year. I feel like I'm going to maybe be on the every other year program. Hopefully
I get to see you. What should I have asked that I didn't ask?
I mean, we covered a lot of the fun stuff. For folks that are that like interactive game shows, I am obsessed with interactive game shows right now, and so I think I think I'm always interested in more of that, and that's just sort of a personal passion. I just like game shows of the past where you were a passive observer. I feel like we've got this opportunity now for everybody to be an active participant, and so I want to do more of that stuff, and I'm also looking for folks that like that stuff.
What do you think about augmented reality? I was going to ask about that when you're talking about immersive theater, and I still think the tech's still 5 years away, really, from being accessible and pragmatic. But what are your thoughts of that, and how's it going to impact the LBE industry specifically?
I think about, I love sci-fi. I think anybody who, I think sci-fi is a wonderful predictor of the future, and it's also just a great way to imagine. And, I love that. And it's science fiction. Oftentimes great sci-fi authors are scientists, right? Making up fiction based on the real reality that they know and where they think this stuff is going. And so I love looking to sci-fi because it paints sometimes a very dystopian picture, if you want to caution people, and sometimes a really utopian picture of what's possible. Yeah. And, there's a couple of sci-fis out there. Denno Coil, which is an anime, Dennoh, I think. Coil is this anime of this kid with some AR glasses and sort of what the world is like as she's running around Tokyo, with weird things happening because she's got these AR glasses. And every now and again, she lifts up the glasses to be was that real life or was that my AR? a visual. So that's interesting. There's a Korean show called Memories of Alhambra. And I think this is also on Netflix, but it sort of takes place at the tipping point when we've got contacts that we can put on as AR glasses, but most people don't have them. So this guy who's this sort of big, billionaire has got his early copy, and he learns of this game that this kid has made on the streets of Alhambra in Spain. And so he flies there with his AR glasses, and he gets in, he's walking around the streets of Alhambra, and all of a sudden there's a guy with a scimitar in the middle of the freaking village, and he gets into a battle with a scimitar, and then he's got to go to the weapons shop, which happens to be the antique store, but it doubles as the weapons shop, and it's like all of this cool stuff overlaid on, it's this amusement park that has been overlaid on the city, right?
Yeah.
Disney had to build an entire Batu in order for me to visit it. What if I could visit the streets of Alhambra, and do a crazy adventure over the top of it? Now, and to your point about LBE, I think that the boundary starts to get a little fuzzy between where's the LBE end and the rest of the experience pick up, because you could be on the streets of Los Angeles going through a whole immersive experience, arrive inside of 2-Bit and get the ultimate final moment that involves haptics and physical and putting on an AR goggles, but it's in the same world that you were seeing in AR, out on the street. I think there's a nice opportunity for sort of leveraging both for their skills, for their.
Yeah, I think the LBE stuff is going to continue to move into the premium experience space as consumer gaming and entertainment technology gets better and better and more immersive.
Yeah.
I think Disney's Galactic Star Cruiser is a great example of that premium experience that you just can't get that at home. I don't care what point in the future you think you're going to go to. Yeah. There's no way you get that at home. And
sounds, again, you getting to sit with the live actor for, one-on-one for a second. I got a hug from Chewie. I was dressed as Han Solo, and at one point Chewie's like, he's like, great to see you, buddy. Gives me a big hug. That was everything I needed in life right there, for that moment. That was amazing. So I think there's really something to be said for that, that physicality, but so I agree. Premium.
Yeah. And then you'd also mentioned NFTs, Web 3.0, that you guys are running some events around that. I think, Dave & Buster's was an early experiment around NFTs with their redemption prizes that were kind of limited and city-based. What do you see in that space, and how it might impact our industry? If it will?
I think there's a few places, that I think are exciting. I think NFTs as a replacement for, as an augmented loyalty program, I think there's a lot of room for exploration there. Now, these are all loaded terms, right? There's been so many scams. There's so much divisiveness. I think a lot of stuff might start to use NFT technology and be called something completely different, but the neat thing about an NFT is that you both have the asset, as well as all of this infrastructure you didn't have to build in terms of transacting the asset, the marketplace to resell the asset, all that stuff that would be a nightmare for one company to build. But if you know that you could just have your annual membership be available in those marketplaces if they wanted, what that does for the consumer is it de-risks the purchase. Right. Yeah. And let's just go back to game cartridges, right? When you and I were growing up and you could buy a game cartridge, that was really cool. You bought the cartridge, you played the game. Maybe you liked the game, maybe you didn't. You had this asset of this cartridge, and you could go back, you could go to GameStop, you could sell it, you could give it to your friend, whatever. The second we got to subscription everything, all of a sudden that went away, right? You have no asset. You are just renting from the service provider. The NFTs is sort of an interesting new option to be able to say, hey, you have an asset now. That asset has some value and you can resell it. And so in the video game analog, I'm getting to sort of buy what looks like a cartridge, and maybe the game is $60. It de-risks it for me if I know that I could sell it for 25 or 30. Yeah. And so I think there's something powerful there. I think that Soho House is vulnerable to a similar product that has an NFT backed membership that when I move out of town, I get to sort of sell that thing and get some value realized for being a loyal customer for so long.
It's a really interesting take on it that I hadn't heard from anybody else about it, de-risking the purchase for something that somebody wants, but how long are you going to want it for? And it's how long are you going to want it for?
Yeah. And I really like carrots instead of sticks, and so it's like you can, one thing I'm, so interested in figuring out is, RSVPs for events. You get people's RSVP, maybe 50% will show up, right? So like, which is sort of not what an RSVP is for. And so how do you, as an event promoter, right size the offering of the event, because you want it to be packed, right? You want it to be packed and not more than packed. You want it to be the right number of people to be able to really enjoy it. Humans like to be around each other. You don't want it to be too vacant. You don't want it to be overpacked. And so, I love the idea of like an NFT that would grow in value as you RSVP'd and actually showed up. Each time it would grow in value. Now, if you ever RSVP'd and didn't show up, it resets back down, and so you're sort of rewarded for doing what you said you were going to do.
Yeah. Did you see the video I did with James Jensen on Jump?
Oh no, but I can't wait to go do Jump. Awesome. And Dave's
got it. Yeah.
Dave's
First of all,
awesome.
you have to go do it.
Great.
And secondly, he's done this clout system where every time you come in a window, your price per goes down, and then you can bring friends in at that same price. And then if you don't show up for 30 days, the price goes up. And so he's created a system that I believe might be blockchain based that allows for that kind of something similar to what you're talking about. And so they're experimenting in that space. Yeah, interesting.
Very neat.
Yeah, if you haven't checked out that video, go to my YouTube channel, check out beingvirtual.tv, and check out the Jump video from James Jensen. It's amazing.
Oh, amazing.
Well, dude, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and then I think the somehow, Web3 has co-opted the metaverse term also. They don't need each other. They happen to have some overlapping, but we can dive into that, some other time. But I do think that as we talk about hybrid events and virtual events, the opportunity to sort of have the digital double sitting there in the world, and some of the content happening there live is available in the virtual world. And, I think there's some exploration there too.
I think people have no idea what's coming with the whole metaverse thing. And it's a true case of, Gartner turned this concept into the hype cycle, but the original concept was called macromyopia. And it was, and it's a term for the fact that things always grow in height when there's transformational technology or transformational developments. People get really excited about it. They overhype them. And then when they don't happen, they turn away to the next thing. But often turns out way bigger than you thought it was going to be. And I think the smartphone's a great example of that. Like nobody saw Uber. Right. Or Instagram none of that stuff. And so the smartphone enabled entire industries and trillions of dollars worth of economic value. You can question how valuable it is, and I think virtual reality is going to do the same thing at another level. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, if you squint, the metaverse is the internet moving from 2D to 3D. What does that mean? At that point, what kind of new ways are we going to play and transact and learn and be fit? And
well, Brent Bushnell, dude, I love catching up with you, even if I have to do a whole show devoted to your creative and crazy thinking. And I look forward to the next hug in the real world somewhere. Where you're in New York for how long?
In New York for a week or so, and back in LA for beta night, and then we've got the Web3 salon in the middle of October, and our anti-gala the middle of November. So New York, LA, sort of all over.
Hopefully, I'll come and get to share you at a couple of those events. I love the anti-gala. I've been a few times now, and I'm usually around in November in California. So
good, man. Let's play.
Yeah, and I'll definitely be coming to Dallas for the opening there.
Beautiful.
Maybe I'll see you there as well.
Fantastic.
So much appreciation for what you've done for the industry, to show people different ways of thinking and different ways for our industry to evolve, and love your passion and energy and just everything about you, man.
Oh man, thanks, Bob. Thank you so much for having me. Really, the feeling is mutual. It's great to see you again, and more fun ahead, man.
Yeah, love to the family.
Ditto.
Hey, that's it for this episode of the Being Virtual Show. I want to thank you for tuning in. Make sure you sign up on beingvirtual.tv for reminders of shows that are coming up. You can check me out at bobcooney.com. And you can go to my YouTube channel and see past episodes of every Being Virtual show going all the way back to, I think, 2018. So we'll see you at the next Being Virtual show live.